Hey witches, Tiffany here on Bewitching.Bemused. I do have a lot going on in life right now, so today is going to be more of an opinion piece rather than a heavily researched and written out topic or script. So bear with me on that, but I do want to talk about fear-mongering within the witchcraft community. This is something that I have been coming across pretty much since day one of just even having a mild interest in witchcraft. For the most part, I do see it online, especially in certain witchcraft communities, so Facebook groups, forums, subreddits, things like that. However, I have also come across it in like fully published, reputable books, as well as just person to person, of course. And then, of course, a very, very big location for it is witch talk. When I say fear-mongering, and I guarantee you, you have come across it before. I know this, we all have. Even if it was just brief or once, when I talk about fear-mongering, it's in a lot of aspects, and it's usually coming across very intense. This could be, you do not ever do witchcraft on an eclipse. You never cast a spell on an eclipse. It could be, you do not ever contact this deity or work with this daemon or even touch that grimoire until you've been practicing for X number of years. Or do not ever work with this deity as your first deity. There's also, I've seen people saying, you don't ever have a mirror at your altar. Don't ever use a mirror to talk to spirits. Don't ever talk to spirits. A lot of the times with these things, you're going to hear absolutes, people speaking in absolutes. So never do this, always do that. Fear-mongering in regards to if you don't cleanse constantly, if you don't cleanse before, if you don't cleanse after, if you don't cast a circle or call on sacred space. It's casting accidental curses. It's telling other people that things you may be doing may be opening you up to demonic possession, or having a dark entity in your house, or a family line blood curse, or you're opening yourself up to some other such horrific, life-ruining, potentially deadly entity or event happening, acting like, you're going to come across so many people in your lifetime that are just going to be out to curse you, and those curses are going to be really hard to remove. Usually, most of the time, it's when you hear people talk in absolutes. So never do this. Always make sure to do that. The or else, XYZ. And a lot of the time, too, people cannot tell you how that's going to happen. Don't ever do magic. Don't ever do a spell on the eclipse. I've only ever seen one explanation for it, and it was linked to a closed practice. Now, if somebody else has a good explanation for me, feel free to drop in the comments. And just to be clear, I'm not talking about having a bit of caution. I'm not talking about having certain safety protocols in place, making sure that you do your research on certain things. Of course, those are all things you should absolutely do, especially because hopefully this is something that you are trying to actively learn and pursue as an area of study and a lifestyle, versus you want a quick fix to something, therefore you want to do the spell. So why bother doing the research? I just want to do this quick spell and make my life better. Yeah, so not how witchcraft works, first of all, but that's off topic. So why do people do this? Okay, I think there are a mix of reasons. I think sometimes people are coming from a place of genuinely wanting to help others because they themselves had a bad experience. Now, where their bad experience came from, whether it was influenced by something else, whether they made a mistake, whether they didn't do their proper research, and they were the kind that was like, I'm just going to cast this quick spell and not do my research, not look further into it, not dig deeper and really figure out what it is that I'm doing, what represents what, who am I calling upon? Maybe they rushed into it because they just wanted that quick spell to fix their lives and didn't really actually devote the time and effort that was required of it, and things went south for them. That's entirely possible, because that's another one people talk about, like backfires. Backfiring spells happen all the time. They don't. They really don't. Do they happen? Sure, it's not impossible. Same with like accidental curses. Not impossible, but very, very rare. The worst that's usually going to happen with a spell is just that nothing happens at all. Not that it's going to do the exact opposite. So many people love to say, oh, this spell could backfire, and then it's going to do the exact opposite, right? So you do a spell for money, suddenly you're going to lose everything that you own. You do a spell for love, you're going to drive that person away, or you might kill them. It's ridiculous, but I digress. Okay, I'm done covering my examples. I think you guys get a good idea of what I'm talking about. But where do these come from? Like I said, part of it could be genuine concern from some people. I think some of it is also urban legendy almost within the community, you know, like one person says that something happened to them, or a coven mate or something, and then that story gets passed along and then passed along and passed along, and then it turns into an internet meme, and then suddenly nobody's allowed to do spells on the eclipse anymore. And kind of along those lines, I do think there's also a lot of people who may or may have not dabbled in the community. Maybe they didn't put their time in, so they didn't get anything out of it, because I've heard that from people. They just were like, well, I've done this spell and it never worked for me. And it's like, okay, but did you also do the basics? Did you study? You know, did you practice your meditation, your mindfulness, your raising energy, the basics, things like that. And they don't even know what I'm talking about. Okay, well, of course your spells didn't work for you, and then they left the community. There's other people who did devote time to it, and then for one reason or another found that it just wasn't for them, and they left the community. Now, some people, when they leave the community, decide that they hate it. Instead of just saying, hey, that wasn't for me, or hey, that didn't work for me, they decide they hate it. Now, sometimes this is because they found Christianity later. Other times it's not. So I'm not trying to place it all on Christians, but sometimes that is the case. And these people, a lot of times they leave the community, then they decide they hate the community, and everybody who's in the community is so stupid and blah, blah, blah. So they have to come back and make other people scared. So sometimes they just make shit up. And then of course, like the new age people or group or movement is not there. There's a lot of overlap with the witchcraft community, but it's not exactly the same thing. But you know, they all get lumped together. And when you look at certain things like the Satanic Panic, which was not that long ago, and if you don't know much about it, look it up. It would be hilarious if it weren't so sad, and if it didn't devastate so many lives in the 80s and in the 90s, and if we didn't have so many politicians who just bought into it and just believed everything that was said. But I do feel that culturally, especially in America, there's a lot of fear left over from that. And there are still elements of the Satanic Panic that carry on today. There are new elements of the Satanic Panic that are going on today, which is just, it's great. And so there are people who come in with a bit of caution and a bit of hesitancy and fear. I see this all the time from people who are like, hey, I really want to get into this. This fascinates me, and I think it could be a very fulfilling practice for me, but I grew up in a Christian household. So how do I get past that fear? And I think there's also a lot of people who where that fear is coming from, maybe they weren't raised in a Christian household, or it was really like Christian light, diet Christian, so they weren't going to church all the time, so they didn't have that level of ingrained fear. But they had these constant nagging messages coming in through their culture, through society, through the American news media. And now they have these fears, but they don't know where they come from, so they just sort of repeat them online for others to see and hear, and now also be afraid of. At the end of the day, I think the number one reason, and this is my own hypothesis, this is, I didn't put out a poll or anything like that. Not to mention, even if I did, I don't think that people who are fear-mongering in the community would be honest about it. So this is just my own hypothesis, but I do think that a big part of it is the gatekeeping aspect. If you keep people afraid of doing certain things, they'll never do them. You can also get some people to like, oh, I only dabble, I can't get too into it because I'm scared. It keeps witchcraft mysterious. It gives it this certain mystique to it, which, is that fun? Sure. Is it glamorous? Sure. But I also like the idea that witchcraft is inviting and that literally anyone can do it But I do feel there are a lot of people out there who view themselves as, oh, I've been practicing for 25 years, so I can do all of the things. But oh, you're new? Ooh, then you better not do what I'm capable of doing, because you might get into trouble. You're not experienced enough. You're not mature enough. You're not old enough. You haven't done what I've done. You haven't seen what I've seen. You haven't felt what I've felt. And yeah, in certain aspects that might be true, but then it leads to this like, okay, but when will they be ready? Because their path is not going to exactly mimic yours. So now you're just scaring them off, and now they may never try certain things that they would have otherwise when they felt ready. But now they're going, well, what does it take to be ready? Like I said, having caution, of course, is not necessarily a bad thing. Fear is there as an evolutionary trait to protect us, of course. But fear can also be a blockade. Fear can also stand in your way. It can prevent you from doing things that you want to do. It can prevent you from growing and evolving in many, many ways, not just in a witchcraft sense, although that is the topic of this video, of course. So at the end of the day, of course, like, always do your research. You should know what it is that you're doing and why it is that you're doing the thing. But don't let it stop you from doing the thing. And don't spend your whole life just doing the research. Do the practice. That's the best way for you to learn. And trust me, there are fixes for mistakes. There are words that you can use to banish evil spirits. There's cleansing, there's curse breaking, there's uncrossing. If you make a mistake, there's undoing spells. You can undo a whole spell that you did. Now, do you want to have to resort to those? Of course not. That would be great, but we all make mistakes here and there. So if you mess up a little bit, trust me, it's not going to kill you. And if it makes you feel better to cleanse before and after, to call on guardians, to cast a circle, create sacred space, then by all means do those things, as long as it doesn't stand in your way of doing all the other things. You really, please just don't let your fear hold you back, and don't let what somebody says online hold you back. Now, if somebody says something online and it concerns you, once again, by all means, do the research on it. That might just be a fluke. That might be their experience. It might seem like they're just on the internet and telling a spooky story because it entertains them. So do whatever you have to do to make yourself feel better, but don't let fear hold you back. If you want to grow as a person, as a braver person, as somebody who is expanding their boundaries, opening their mind, testing themselves, testing the waters, and just evolving in general, the best thing that you can do is find a fear that you have and face it. And I don't mean the most extreme of fears, start off light and build from there. And there are certain fears you may never want to face, and that's perfectly okay. But, fear serves its purpose. Sometimes that purpose is to ward you off, and sometimes that purpose is to help you grow. So I'm not saying fear is unnecessary, but I do think that fear mongering is absolutely ridiculous. So I would love to hear some of the most ridiculous things you've ever heard in the witchcraft community that was fear mongering. Drop it in the comments below. And also feel free, if you are curious about something that scared you off that you read online. Again, I don't know the answer to the whole why you shouldn't do magic on the eclipse thing. To me, it's very similar to doing magic on the dark moon. But anyway, if you have a question about one, feel free to drop it in the comments below. If I don't have an answer for you of why somebody might say that, somebody else might have it for you. And honestly, if you can't find an answer, then it's probably bullshit. But most of the time, it's just going to be, well, yeah, some people feel that way because XYZ reason. But at the end of the day, do it anyway. There's lots of success stories, or do it, but maybe try cleansing this first, or I don't know, whatever. Just feel free, if your fear is holding you back on something, please drop it in the comments. That's part of what I want this channel to be, as a community where we can all help each other out. So, like I said, if I don't have an answer for you, maybe somebody else will. So leave it in the comments and let's all move past our fears together. And also, please, everybody, just stay off of TikTok. Ugh.